Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Let's start our video with an unusual way to get rid of medical bill collectors, which was used by the grandmother of our OP. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Grandma was harassed by medical bill collectors. My grandma told me this story a few years ago. My dad was the oldest of 3 kids, and apparently there were some complications at the hospital which racked up a pretty hefty medical bill. Well, my grandparents were going through a rough time financially and just couldn't pay those bills at that moment. The bill collectors didn't really care, though. They kept calling and hounding my grandmother at all times of the day and night, trying to get her to pay the bills. After several weeks of her telling them patiently every single time they called that as soon as she came into a little money, she'd start paying them, she did eventually too, she got a bit irate. Fast forward to about a month after my dad was born, he's screaming his head off and just won't calm down for anything. Who should call right at this moment? Correct, the bill collectors. Understandably, my grandma is pretty fed up at this point, and as soon as the bill collector finishes his or her spiel, my grandma simply yelled, "Do you hear this?" and held the phone next to my screaming dad. "Repossess it!" and hung up. She was never bothered by the collectors again, but she still paid the debt off when they weren't hurting so much financially. And our next story. New manager makes working stressful. This story happened over 20 years ago during the late 90s. I was 17 and had just recently gotten a job as a dishwasher at a local summer camp. I had my interview with the acting kitchen manager, who we'll call Susan. The original manager had just recently left the company and put Susan in charge. This didn't seem to bother Susan as she was eyeing for the kitchen manager job that had recently opened. Susan was a sweetheart, she was nice and helped me out with everything. I also interviewed with Bob, the camp director, as Susan didn't have any hiring or firing power, as she was just an acting manager. There was Todd, an older guy who lived only a few blocks from the camp and didn't have a car, so he rode his bike in the morning, who was also a dishwasher. He was my supervisor, but also really nice. Dale, the head cook, had been there for a long time and used to be a cook for the local middle school. Debbie, another cook, Ellie, a kitchen server, later girlfriend, and Boris, a Russian dishwasher who had a sponsorship at the camp as part of their Worldview program. There were 3 other dishwashers, Dumb, Dumber, and Dumbest, who all call the Dummies, but they're not part of the Revenge. Just that there were 3 dishwashers that were the worst. Nobody got along with them, and they couldn't get fired because Susan was acting manager. Bob, the director of the camp, was also a nice man, but also kind of weird. This is important later on. In August, we got the news. The corporation had picked a new kitchen manager, and it was someone from outside the company. Susan was really upset. She'd worked hard for years for this job, and the higher-ups picked someone outside of the company. The new manager was named Karen. The first time we met Karen, she gave a speech how new changes are coming and will now work as a team, and was condescending at Susan's work. The first thing she did was to do a massive cleanup to the large walk-in fridges. The strange thing was she didn't have the staff to do it, but it was, later on we found out, her family cleaning it out. She also hired her husband, Dan, to be the assistant manager, pretty much forcing Susan out. In the end, all that was left was Ellie, Dale, Todd, Debbie, Boris, a few others, and me. Karen then begins her terror. It only took a week, but it happened. Her fangs started to show and the power got to her. Each person felt the wrath of her. She would come in late, leave early, but yell at everyone for doing the same thing. Everyone had problems with her, but here are a few that I remember. Todd was starting to get written warnings about coming in late, as the camp is located in a rural area. It doesn't have street lights, and biking in the morning is dangerous. She called him lazy for not having a car, and it didn't matter, she needed him in here. Dale, the head cook, was starting to get fed up with Karen ordering too little of the food and the wrong food, having cheaper products, and being forced to work with a broken stove. One time he asked her when the stove would be fixed, and her response was, "Fix it yourself, you're a big boy." So oftentimes we'd run out of food for the night and had to make sandwiches for the people. Ellie got the worst of it. Since we were dating, I found out that she had an eating disorder a few years earlier. She was 2 years older than me and used to have anorexia. Karen kept calling her piggy and fat and how she shouldn't eat all the food in the kitchen. I also felt the wrath of her too. She would change my schedule around randomly after posting it. Unlucky for her, Dale had my number and called me whenever he found a schedule change, but it was getting old quickly. Another example was that she would tell me to mop the floor, and Boris would come over and help me out because he had nothing to do, and then got on me for Boris finishing my job, even though Boris spoke up and said that he asked her if he could help me, and she said yes. After a few weeks of this, late September, I went to Bob about her and told him everything about what she was doing to us. I found out from Bob that Dale also went to him earlier that week with the same thing. However, having the spine of a jellyfish, he said, "I'll talk with Karen." Then a day later, Karen starts getting on us for going to Bob and not her, saying, "If you have a problem with me, you come to me, not to Bob." This was the last straw for us. So I talked with the rest of the kitchen staff, and we decided that she needed to leave. I'm eating dinner with Ellie when Boris comes looking for a pen. He was trying to fill out information so he could go home to Russia. I don't remember what, it's just that he was planning on leaving in 3 weeks, and sits down at her desk. He's opening up the desk to find a black pen when he finds a check. It was a paycheck to one of the dummies who left a month earlier. It was his final paycheck, highly illegal to withhold a paycheck. Boris showed us the paycheck, and then he started to look at the computer that was on her desk. While Karen was a jerk, she was also stupid and left everything unlocked. There he saw the orders. She was ordering things that we never got in the kitchen or ordering extra stuff. It turns out that she was ordering more food than we thought, stealing the food and using it for her own personal use. I told Boris that he was looking through her personal files, and he said, "What are they going to do, deport me?" We also found out that Bob was getting a kickback from the extra food that Karen was getting in to keep quiet. So it explained why Bob had the spine of a jellyfish towards Karen. Boris printed out the information and held on to it. This is important later on. It then hit us. In about 3 weeks, mid-October, corporate was going to be having a retreat using the camp. All the bigwigs and higher-ups were going to be there, and we were all scheduled to be at work that day because there was going to be a huge feast for dinner, while lunch corporate was going to have grilled burgers and hot dogs. I remember that corporate brought in an outside vendor for the grilled stuff since they were preparing a big feast. Karen was also going to be there to impress the bigwigs. We decided to act on that day, but also knew what to do beforehand. It was also going to be Boris's last day as he was leaving to Russia that night. So on the day of the feast, all of us show up on time at around noon. The dinner feast wasn't going to be until 5 p.m., so we had plenty of time to prepare, or at least that's what Karen thought. We got there and just sat down around the kitchen and did no work. Karen started to yell and talk about how today's important for her and that she'd have our heads for this. So Dale comes up to her and says, "We quit." Karen went full on deer in headlights, and her mouth was so wide open that you could throw peanuts into it. All of us walked out on her, into our cars, and drove away before she could get a word in. We decided to just quit. After we quit, all of us started to look for jobs. While some had security lined up since we knew this was going to happen, but knew that a major shakeup like this would grab the attention of the bigwigs. I found out a month later when I got a call from Susan, the original acting manager before Karen, asking me if I wanted my old job back. It turns out that Karen called Bob and said her whole kitchen staff just left and they needed to tell the bigwigs that the feast was going to be canceled. She couldn't get into the fridge with all the food since her key didn't work and nobody was picking up to help her. She tried to call others that left or were fired, but since she was so toxic, nobody wanted to work with her. The bigwigs were not happy. They went right to the kitchen to find out what was wrong and saw that nobody but Bob, Karen, and Dan were there without any food cooking. Boris walks in and Karen starts yelling at him, saying how could he do this to her? Boris then hands the bigwigs the printed information he got from Karen's computer earlier and had made copies of, gave it to everyone in the room. Boris told me through email that he wasn't sure who was in charge, so he gave everyone in the room the information since he figured one of them had to be the head guy. Then he got into a taxi and went back to Russia. Corporate started an investigation as soon as that happened. Bob, Karen, and Dan were fired almost right on the spot, and not only did they find out about the withholding checks and backdoor deals with Bob, but also Bob was stealing money from the camp to support an alcohol habit. Karen and Bob were arrested for fraud and most likely other things. It's been over 20 years. I don't remember everything, but that one stuck out at me. Pretty much the whole camp had a shakeup. Susan took over as the manager, got the job she wanted with a pay raise. She did leave after they gave the job to Karen, but her new job wasn't working out, and about half the staff came back. I came back too. Todd never came back and works at a local liquor store, at least last time I saw him. I haven't been in that store in about 7 years. Nicely done. Teen jobs are often the worst because teens are usually not fully aware of laws that protect them and are easily bullied. They also produce lots of learning experiences. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.